All right, everyone, it looks like we've kind of evened out here with our attendees coming in. So I'm sure as everybody starts to come in, they can catch up. Good morning. Welcome on this wonderful Saturday morning. I know we all wish that we could be out in the bay, gloved up and ready to go, but here we are celebrating Coastal Cleanup Day anyways. So thank you for coming. My name is Carissa. I'm with the Newport Bay Conservancy, if you don't know me. I do the education programs here at the Bay, or at the Bay. I'm not here there now. Also with us is Hillary Cunningham, who works with our volunteers. She'll be kind of in the background today and helping out, but she's also on the call. And then we have our lovely group of panelists that are going to be sharing some great information today. So just to give you a little bit of a background here, if you have participated, most of you I'm sure have participated with Coastal Cleanup Day before, either with the Bay or with other areas. But just to give you a little bit of history, we've been doing Coastal Cleanup Day in the Bay for around 15 years. The Newport Bay Conservancy itself, I have records that go back to 2014 in terms of like an organized sponsored event that we've been doing probably with the Coastal Commission, but I know it's been going on way back before then with Fish and Wildlife and you know, loose organizations of other groups and what have you. Usually we have around 1,000 participants for Coastal Cleanup Day. Last year, I believe we had around 850 to go out into the Bay and clean up at different sites around the Bay. And it's typical for us to pick up somewhere around 15 to 20,000 pounds of trash and debris in the Bay in one day. And that may seem like a heck of a lot of trash. But where does it all come from? It's not just coming from our local neighborhood and, you know, the area directly around the Bay. It's coming from the whole scope of our watershed. And a watershed is just an area of land that all the water drains off of it and flows down towards the lowest point, which is usually the ocean. And everything within that watershed comes with it when it rains. So our trash comes from around 154 square miles of watershed, and that encompasses 9 different cities. We'll talk about that later at the end of the day. But just to give you kind of a frame of reference as to where all this trash is coming from, it's coming from our own back door. It's coming from our own neighborhoods, our own streets, and everywhere is part of a watershed. You may not be part of the Newport Bay watershed particularly, but you're part of a watershed no matter where you are. So this trash is coming from everyone, from everywhere. So when we clean up 20,000 pounds in a day, it's a big effort, and it does a lot of good, but usually the next rainstorm is gonna bring a whole bunch more. So it's a constant effort to stop that flow of trash, to reduce our waste, and to make a difference in the long run. Coastal Cleanup Day as an event started in 1985 with the California Coastal Commission. It is the largest volunteer event in the country. The California Coastal Cleanup Day is the largest event in the country. And it is a part of the International Coastal Cleanup Day, which is organized by the Ocean Conservancy, which is the largest volunteer effort on the planet. So you guys are part of something really big, obviously this year, because we have some crazy situations that are not allowing us to all get together. We are taking this effort to our neighborhoods and still making a difference by collecting wherever we are and trying to make a difference in the way we live so we can make this planet a better place to live on. So let's see here. Looks like we have a good amount of participants. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today. Sarah Burgess is here with us from the Newport Beach Surfrider Foundation, and she's going to talk to us a little bit. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. We're so glad that you could join us, and thank you to Newport Bay Conservancy and my co-panelists this morning. Thank you for the honor to kick us all off. So I want to take a moment and welcome you to the Surfrider Foundation presentation. Hillary with Newport Bay Conservancy is clicking through my slides for me this morning, so I really appreciate it, Hillary. And I'll just give you a nod at the end of each slide for next slide. All right, so next slide will tell you our mission with the Surfrider Foundation. We're dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of the world's oceans, waves, and beaches for all people through a powerful activist network. I do want to take a moment and acknowledge the lands that we work on are the indigenous peoples of the Tongva people and the Kizh Nation. We honor those that have come before us, and we strive to leave every place cleaner than we found it. Next slide, please. Our network is definitely a global network. As you can see from this map, we do have some affiliate organizations all around the world. And on the next slide, you'll see our outline of where our chapters are here in the US. We have just over 80 chapters, and we have about 95 youth clubs. Youth Club is a really interesting part of our chapter activist network, and they are more and more every day becoming wiser and more outspoken than any adults are. And well, they are adults too, of course, but this is our high school and university level. We call them our student club network, and they are growing voices in our activism for our mission of Surfrider. Each chapter in Surfrider is conducted through leadership with an executive committee comprised of volunteers. And then some chapters, like ours in Newport, actually have a paid position staff member. So I am a part-time staff member with Newport Beach Surfrider. Sorry, I should have started with that. The beach cleanups coordinator for Newport chapter. But the majority of our chapters across the nation are going to be volunteers at all levels in the chapter. And it's just really amazing how much we can get done with the power of people like yourself that show up and work to make our coasts and beaches a better place and cleaner. Next slide, please. I'm going to let Hillary open up a short video. I have a short 30-second video that explains our Better Beach Alliance, which is a major part of how we clean up beaches.
Did you know Surfrider has been cleaning our beaches for the past 35 years?
Since we started measuring our impact in 2015,
over 100,000 volunteers have participated.
In over 2,000 beach cleanups.
Collected over 650,000 pounds of trash.
Become part of the Better Beach Alliance.
And leave the beach better than you found it.
All right, great. So that Better Beach Alliance, and as you'll see more on the next slide, revolves around the companies that we have involved that host cleanups with us or through their own portions like Cliff Bar to do these cleanups of our beaches. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit of an overview. Cleanups are what we are known for, and we love that. It's actually one of the best ways, #1 ways that's our entry point for new volunteers to find us, is that they will show up to a beach cleanup, they'll see that classic blue tent on the beach, wander by our table, or sometimes come close enough where we can invite them in to grab a bucket and be convinced to join our beach cleanups. So beach cleanups are a hallmark of how we are known, but we wish it wasn't so. If we were 100% successful in mitigating forms of pollution in this world, then we wouldn't have litter washing up on our shorelines, on our river channel beds, and along our coastlines. So the fact of the matter is that as we get closer and closer to curbing plastic pollution, plastic being the #1 source of the pollution we do find on our beaches, as we get closer to that goal, we will be successful, and we should theoretically have to have less cleanups. But in the meantime, and for the 35+ years Surfrider has been going about its mission, we are happy to host those cleanups, and we're happy to gain more support for them every time. So there will definitely be a lot more awesome information from OC Coastkeeper later in this presentation about plastic pollution. And I want to take a moment to show A couple things on this slide. On the left-hand side, there's a beach cleanups or beach cleanup results slide, and you should be able to see some graphics there. This is a link to our data card. We strive at each cleanup to chart the trash that we are picking up. This means that it might happen with pen and paper. Recently, we've evolved a Google form. In the age of COVID, we've still been encouraging people to go out solo or as a household to do their own cleanups. It doesn't have to be on a beach. So if you're out there and you're not feeling like battling traffic or you're just trying to stay extra close to home, we support that, and you can pick up trash anywhere, even fully on land, nowhere near a water source, and you can send it to us to add to our data collection. These beach cleanup results are really important because the tally of what we're picking up will translate into the future action that we're able to take, that I'll talk about in just a moment. So after the presentation today, we encourage you to go check us out. Instagram, Facebook are our main channels. Surfrider Newport Beach is our handle on each, and then hashtag Surfrider Solo Cleanup. You'll see some photos and pictures of chapters all over the nation that are conducting these solo cleanups in the age of COVID and moving forward. So on the next slide, there will be another short video. We'll move into the subject matter of civic engagement, everyone's favorite subject this time of year.
Hey guys, it's Lakey Peterson. This November, I encourage you to get out and vote. I will be voting for a cleaner ocean and a cleaner earth. Your vote counts, so make sure on November 3rd you get out there and vote for what you believe in.
So moving into the next slide, we'll briefly cover some of these activities that we have been involved with, again, in our 35+ years of grassroots activism that has included from the very start of the mission of Surfrider was an intent based on lobbying to protect a wave break up in the Los Angeles area. And so these slides go over a little bit more and show you a picture there of what our lobbying can look like. The title on this slide, 40 Victories for the Year and Counting, is actually updated at least since Thursday's meeting. There's 48 coastal victories. A huge part of the work that we do at the headquarters level and through the strength of all of our chapters is to gather people together to amplify voices in protection of waves, beaches, and oceans on all those coastlines as well. This picture on the slide is a picture of participation from Coastal Hill Recreation Day, which is at the federal level. We do participate with hundreds of activists and staff members coming to lobby. You'll see Congressman Harley Ruda there in the photo with some of his constituents that were talking about key primary issues. The issue areas that we covered this year on Federal Coastal Hill Day were take action on climate change, protecting clean water and public health, reducing plastic pollution, and defending public lands and waters. I highly encourage you to go to our site and to find more detail on the legislative issues that we support, that we're looking for more support on. You can sign up to receive action alerts. A simple petition can go a long way. A personalized email about a petition subject can go an even longer way and sometimes make its way through those filters that our Congress people have from the hundreds of emails they're getting a day. And on the next slide, you'll see that our call to action for Vote 2020 is very simple. We want you to get involved. We want you to make sure you're registered to vote, make sure others you know are registered to vote. And as a 501c3 organization, it is very important to know that Surfrider doesn't oppose or support any particular candidates. We are focused on the mission, the issue area of our mission. So if you have questions about it, you can also find us through the hashtag Vote 2020, Surfrider Vote 2020, and we have more details as well. There's a lot more to say there, of course, in an election year. However, I highly encourage you all to go to our site, look through some of our blogs, and sign up for our emails. You can sign up at your chapter's level, or you can simply go to surfrider.org and you can be added to a list of a wealth of information, as many email alerts on different subjects as you'd like, or as few as you'd like a week or a month. And finally, on the last slide, to kind of go into our next subject matter and the rest of this Trash Talk webinar, is that we're having a fun contest that we are in our 5th year of. This is called the Found Objects Contest. Turn your trash into art. You know, trash is out there. It's going to be for a long time to come. We may as well have a little bit of creative fun with it. So we encourage you to participate, pick up those pieces of trash, maybe for the rest of the week, the rest of the month, put together a little art submission for us, a design, and then you can submit it under Surfrider Objects. And I really appreciate the time. I know that we have some other exciting panelists to hear from and their subjects this morning. So I'm happy to take any brief questions now. If there is time, Carissa or Hillary, I'll let you be in charge of that. Otherwise, I'll look out in the chat box if anybody has specific questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I forgot to mention at the beginning, everyone, if you have questions, go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can type it in there and I can go ahead and help either answer that question or put it out to whichever panelist is talking. I do see, Sandra Middleton, that you have your hand raised. I'm gonna go ahead and open your talk function. Hi, Sandra, did you have a question this morning?
Hi, no, I'm sorry. I think we pushed the wrong button. I'm so sorry.
No worries, not a problem at all. All right, everyone. So if you do have a question, you can raise your hand. However, I will probably wait until after the panelist is done with their presentation, and then we can go ahead and take questions at that point. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to introduce Taya Merritt and Hannah Lee from EcoNow.
Hi, everyone. Taya, I think your mic's muted still.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Taya.
And I'm Hannah.
I'm just gonna pull up my slides just so I can see. And then Hannah, is the screen sharing for them to see that as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna set that up right now. Might be. There we go.
And then you can switch the slides for me, yeah?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming in. Thank you guys for having us. My name is Taya, and I am the founder of EcoNow, Orange County's first zero waste shop. And I'm here with Hannah. She's a team member at EcoNow, and we're going to talk to you about our store and what we do, why we started. Also, we're going to talk about composting and zero waste and how the two work together. So thanks for having us. And then I shared this picture right here. It's of me in the middle and Hannah on the right and another team member of us. And this was at our trailer where we first opened a zero waste shop last October in Costa Mesa. And I wanted to share this. It shows the growth that we've had. Not been around for too long, but if you are familiar with us, you'll know that we've grown a lot, and that is entirely to our community and the support that people put together and put forward to be sustainable. And so I wanted to share that photo and yeah, just share how excited we are about our community wanting to live sustainably. Okay, so EcoNow, our mission is to educate and provide resources for our community. We want to help create awareness around sustainable living and to be able to make positive change for our environment. We are a zero waste shop with bulk refillable, non-toxic cleaning hygiene products. And we like the aspect of being able to create awareness around different ways of consuming. So most of the time, you know, we consume things in single-use plastic waste. And with EcoNow, we are changing the way people think about that and changing the way that their habits are created. So if you are used to purchasing products in plastic, our mission is to help you realize that there's different ways of consuming and setting forth on that path. we are a shop and we provide these resources for our community, but we also pride ourselves on being a source for education for people. And if people in our community have questions about how they can change their habits, how they can be more sustainable, we want to be a source for them to ask these questions, and then we can help you move forward on a more sustainable path. So that's EcoNow, our mission and what we do, and we do it for our communities to be that resource. And then Hannah, if we can go to the next slide.
Of course.
So zero waste, right? We're a zero waste shop, and it's kind of a interesting term. It can be confusing for people, but I want to let you know like what I think about zero waste and how I take it. For me, it's more of a lifestyle versus a literal term. I like to think of zero waste as experiences, and not every experience you're going to have is zero waste, but obviously the more the better. Even as a zero waste owner, zero waste shop owner, I still consume unnecessary waste. And it's not about necessarily having zero waste, it's about the awareness. And I think that the difference between a person who is zero waste and still consumes plastic sometimes and a person who just consumes plastic, the difference being that a person who's zero waste is aware of the issue and wants to move forward with change. And so if you're in a situation where you do have an experience where you're given a plastic bag or you're given a plastic utensil, but you consider yourself zero waste, it's about me having the awareness that that's a problem, and that next time I'm striving to get away from that or do better. And so I think that zero waste can be seen as a literal term, but I encourage people to look at it more as a lifestyle. And so obviously being zero waste means we're going to consume less and we're going to consume smarter. It's really hard in our culture because we're flooded with a lot of unnecessary waste. And being zero waste means that you want to eliminate as much single-use waste as possible. And to eliminate single-use waste, you have to know the alternatives. And so when you're zero waste, you also need to educate yourself on the alternatives and learn of what to do for reusables and using alternatives to that waste. So it's all these things of learning these habits, changing the way that you think, changing the way that you do things. And it's not always easy to be zero waste because you have to do things differently, and it's sometimes uncomfortable. So a zero waste lifestyle is something that you evolve into and you grow into and you get more comfortable with over time. Even something simple as asking to have your coffee cup refilled at a coffee shop can be difficult. And so zero waste is something that, like I said, you can grow into. I like this really awesome quote about zero waste living. It's, we don't need a few people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. So like I said, zero waste can be seen as more of an experience versus a literal term, and you're always working towards better. And then Hannah, next slide, please. Well, we see the effects of pollution in our communities, like Sarah was talking from Surfrider. We see it all over in our communities. It comes from different places. Every day in Orange County, I see waste on our freeways, in our communities, at our parks. Everywhere we can see litter, we can see waste floating about, and it's reached our backyard, so to speak. It's so blatant in our community that it's concerning even here. I can't imagine how terrible it is in our ocean and in our landfills. And that's really why I started EcoNow, is because I realized that we have these things going on in our backyard that we need to make change about. And we need to do it for our community. We need to do it for our world. So everything is being obviously polluted, from our air to our water sources, our animals, our ecology system is being infected. And so being zero waste can help us help our community, and we're doing it on a consumer level. There's obviously more people presenting today that are going to be talking about the statistics of waste, and like Sarah was sharing, and as well as Leo, who's coming on with OCC next. And I'll let them talk about it. They're much more versed in these statistics. But as far as being a zero waste person, the goal for myself is obviously to better our environment, to better our community. As a zero waste person, you are doing it for sustainable living, for our future, and for everything that surrounds us. Next slide, Hannah. So we have the 7 R's of sustainability. We obviously need to rethink. Zero waste makes you have to start thinking about things differently. You have to reshape the habits that have been formed for you. I remember when I was in middle school and I saw somebody use a reusable bag at the grocery store for the first time. And I had a moment of like, that's probably unsanitary, right? And it was something that struck me as wrong. And obviously now it's a completely different perspective. I always use reusable bags, and I realize that not only is it safe, but it's really good for our environment. So being zero waste, it's a mindset that you have to reshape all of these things that have been made onto you at your core from when you were young. And you have to start thinking about things differently, thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, and how your choices are impacting the environment, and how these new things that you could be doing would better impact the environment. So first we have to rethink, and then we go into, of course, refusing and reducing and reusing. Refusing is a big one. We have to start really thinking about what we don't need and what's unnecessary, and can we say no to it? There's so many wasteful products out there, and there's so many things that we just consume unnecessarily. It's part of our culture, and we're at the point where we have to start changing our culture and start saying no to these things. And as a consumer, we have the power to help change other businesses and other practices in our life. So if we are all on a consumer level saying no to plastic utensils, hopefully we can, change the way that businesses and restaurants want to run their business because of that. And they'll recognize that that's important to us, so much so that we're making a demand for them to be different. So we need to rethink, we need to refuse, we need to reduce. Obviously, we still have to consume certain things that are wasteful. And if we have to consume it, maybe we can reduce how much of it that we do consume. So if you're out and about, and I always refer to plastic utensils and single-use waste at restaurants and stuff, and if you're out, and this example of reducing would be, instead of getting both a plastic fork and a plastic spoon, maybe you could just choose to have just the plastic fork and sip your soup with just the cup. You don't need the spoon, right? So reducing and reusing. Obviously at Eco Now, we're very big on reusables. We want you to bring your own container and reuse what you already have, or what you already own is perfectly good, and it's the most sustainable way to work with what you've already got. And we're all familiar with repairing. We need to consider what we can repair and what we can fix versus just throwing it out and tossing it away. And recycling is a thing of its own. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Leo has to say about recyclables. It's my understanding that plastic, only 9% of a plastic gets recycled. So relying on recycling is just not the greatest option. And so that's why it's more on the bottom of these 7 R's of sustainability. And finally, rot, which Hannah's going to talk to you about. She's going to talk about home composting and organic waste, and how we can use what we use in our home and what we use as consuming for our food, and how we can compost that and reduce all the unnecessary waste that goes to landfill. So thank you guys, and this is Hannah. She's going to talk with you about composting.
Thank you, Taya. So yeah, I feel like composting is one of those things that I always hear people talking about how it's a very inaccessible thing, like there's no space in their backyard, it's smelly. There's a whole like load of issues that I hear, especially when I'm working and talking to customers at Eco Now. I feel like they're expressing these things about composting and how, yeah, they can't do it. But I would like to come on here and talk about how you can, and how it's very easy, and how I found in my experience of, yeah, just how it's been a really simple and educational experience for me. So first I wanted to talk about, of course, like why is composting a sustainable option? Food waste happens on all ends of the food industry, from the manufacturer to the agricultural setting to us, the consumers. There's always going to be food waste. And as you see that number right there, 133 billion pounds of food waste. And I can assume that this has grown because this number is from the USDA in 2010. And, you know, I definitely think this is probably larger at this point. But that's so much food waste. And I think that if we all individually are trying to find a solution to that food waste, composting is a really good option. You can create your own natural fertilizer by composting your food that would otherwise go to the landfill and contribute to greenhouse gases that are ultimately causing the climate crisis. And of course, side note, I know that like big industries are definitely the big contributor, but of course the landfills are also contributing. And I think we as individuals can curb that a little bit by home composting. So of course, what is composting? Or what is compost? I feel like it kind of, some people just like, yeah, don't know. I didn't know before I started composting what exactly composting was and how it worked. So essentially you're turning your food scraps into a nutrient-rich fertilizer, and it's natural. So all the fertilizers we're using we buy at Home Depot, a lot of them are synthetic. So they're not they're not natural. So this is the alternative. And the food scraps and the other items that we can compost, they're very rich in carbon and nitrogen, which are really ideal in the, decomposition. And in the end product, it creates nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium rich fertilizer, which, if you're familiar with fertilizer, those are the three components that are always in fertilizer, the NPK ratio. And these are all things that are very vital to plant growth. So by taking your food scraps and composting them and creating this fertilizer, you are giving your food scraps another life cycle, which they're not destined for the landfill where they're just going to contribute to greenhouse gases. And yeah, instead you can feed your garden, either your landscaping plants, or if you garden your own food, this is a great alternative. And that's what I've been doing. So there's two types of composting methods, and I believe there's a few others, but these are the two like main methods. There's traditional composting and vermicomposting. So traditional composting, it's based upon microorganisms that in the right conditions, they're able to multiply and then break down your food, and then whatever other items that you put into your compost, which I'll get into. And then vermicomposting is based solely upon worms breaking down your food and eating your food. I personally only have experience in vermicomposting, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to set your compost up. But the methods are the same for both. You just have to look out for a few different things if you do a vermicompost. So yeah, I set up my vermicompost. I got it as a Christmas gift. Sorry, I heard a noise. Did I break up? No?
You're good.
Okay. So yeah, so I set up my vermicompost. I got the container as a gift. It's for number 2 that I have right here. It's a tiered tray system. And all I had to do was get different, so obviously I have my food scraps, but I needed to accumulate like dry material, which is the brown materials that I'll talk about in a second. So yeah, if you consider setting up your any type of compost, you should first decide what method you'd like to do, what works best for you. because certain composts, like a traditional compost can take more things, and worms are more sensitive to certain foods. Like you can't feed them citrus, obviously. Anything that's super acidic, you really can't put in there because it can kill them, which is kind of a stressful thing. But yeah, so whichever method is best for you, you can like do some research on this. I'm just gonna be going over very basic things. But yeah, so then you find your container. You can literally get a Rubbermaid container, get 2 of them, like drill some holes into like one of them and put it inside another. And so it like can breathe, because that's a big thing in the composting process is there needs to be air and oxygen running through the compost to be able to break down properly. You should ensure that you have enough materials. So a big thing with composting, you need to have green and brown materials, which are those nitrogen and carbon based materials that help with the decomposition process. There's a whole load of things that you can look up on the internet. I only like inserted a few things that are these nitrogen and carbon rich items. So your food scraps are going to be the nitrogen. Same with the eggshells, coffee grounds, plant trimmings. And then for the brown materials, it's going to be more like paper, like dried things that you can put in there. And they both contribute different things to the composting process. The nitrogen tends to speed up the microorganisms if we're talking about traditional composting. And then the brown materials is what like feeds them essentially and like creates the very aromatic, not aromatic, just anaerobic, conditions. And then of course there's things that you can put into traditional compost that you can't put into a vermicompost, but since we're limited time, I only inserted a few things, but we have a blog post actually that has way more in-depth information on all of this. And yeah, final step, if you're setting up a compost, you just put green material in and cover it with a layer of brown material, and you just continue to do that when you add different green and brown materials. You just like layer them. And then it's also important, I know I mentioned earlier how people say, oh, compost smell, like they attract pests and stuff like that. And this is true if you don't consider like how large the food is that you're putting in. Like I recommend cutting it up. The moisture content, so if you're spraying enough water in it, oxygen flow, if you're turning the compost enough, and then temperature too. All of these things can contribute to a smelly compost or like an unsuccessful compost. And then I also wanted to include things that you are able to compost if you've never considered it before, from EcoNow and then other things from around the house. So these are things that I've personally tested out, and they do indeed break down. So we have a lot of things that are packaged in cardboard and just like paper in general. So I know a lot of our natural deodorants have cardboard packaging. Same with actually just like a lot of our products have cardboard packaging. So all of those will break down. We have bamboo cotton swabs, and those are like my worms' favorite things. They like devour the cotton swabs. So that's a thing that I really, really recommend. And then our coconut scours, which is a scrubber that you can use for your dishes. And then loofahs, of course, which is a plant. And then other kind of weird things that you're able to compost, fur, like your pet fur and your own hair. You can compost your own nail clippings, coffee grounds, and different paper filters, and wine corks. I've never done wine corks before, but I was researching that and I found that to be really interesting. So yeah, that is all. I hope that was helpful. And I hope that inspired at least somebody to maybe start their own compost.
Yeah, and like Hannah said, you can find more information on home composting on our website, where underneath our blog, where Hannah went very in depth on how to do your own home compost, and successfully so. And obviously too, we like to share things on Instagram and Facebook about what we're doing at Eco Now and all the things that, you know, we're providing for you as a consumer to, you know, reduce your waste. So you can follow us there. And thank you guys for having us. And I'm so excited to hear what everybody else has to say as well.
Thank you, Taya. Thank you, Hannah. We did have one question. Nikki had asked, obviously we're all feeling it during these times of COVID, having to use more single-use items. What are some ways that you might suggest in helping to curb that guilt from using more single-use items during this time when we're being a little extra cleanly?
For me personally, it has forced me to seek out certain places in my community that are local that will still support the for your cups or even fill my cup. So I think that COVID's made me really focus on my community and support my small businesses more than ever. And I also have kind of weighed the two and say, what's more important to me, is it supporting this business that I've always supported, regardless of them doing single-use plastic right now. So I kind of have a little bit of a balance of continuing to support these small businesses, even if they can't give me what my reusable, and then also to trying to find new places that are still practicing that and seeking that out more. So I've actually learned of a lot more businesses in my community since COVID. So that's good. And that's one way that I've dealt with it personally, but it has been hard. And it's a little bit discouraging at times, but I keep on my eyes ahead and I think about how this is temporary and our goal for sustainable living is forever. And this is the way that we're going, and it's not going to stop. And so we just have to get through this time, and we're going to see the other side of it. And I think we'll be stronger and more aware and even better moving forward.
And I know Sarah also posted in the chat a resource, really great resource for restaurants that have a lot of friendly items and things like that. So check that out. And then I would just also
add something super quick, Carissa, for the state of California. I'm not sure how many, I know we have some people in the chat that I know that are not in California that are tuning in, but for California with the bag ban, the grocery store, we went through that wave. The bag ban, to be able to use your grocery bags again, is you're able to do that. Some places, such as Trader Joe's chains, prefer you to go do it outside at a table, but you do have that right to use your own bag. And of course, we never want to give grief to the workers in the store who may not know the rule or their manager hasn't told them. But there is a very friendly, nice way you can inform people that you are allowed to use your own bag. And even what I started doing during COVID, I just started wheeling out the entire cart to my car. No bag from the store, none of my bags. Don't worry about my cloth bag getting on your conveyor, you know. And one thing on Surfrider is that we have a science team that's heavily rooted in the research and producing as accurate information through our blogs as possible. So we had a couple great blogs written during the height of COVID starting, which was like, can I get COVID if I go in the ocean? Can I get COVID from my reusable stuff? There's some great resources, and so I'd be happy to keep linking that. And just like Taya said, do your research, because it's easy to get dejected, but we're in this for the long haul. So a few months of a plastic bags coming back is not the best, but you know, reuse them or start refusing them again and feel good about doing that.
Thanks. Yeah, exactly. Reduce, reuse, recycle. We'll get through this. And, you know, I think just we'll add a fifth R, because I always say reduce, reuse, recycle, refuse certain items. And when we can't refuse, let's research. We'll figure out what we can use and how best we can do it. So now we have 5 R's. All right, let's move on. We're gonna introduce Leo Stiles. He's with Orange Coast College with the Recycling Center there. Good morning, Leo.
Good morning, everybody. How's it going?
Good.
All right, let me pop this open. And Perfect. All right, everybody. My name's Leo Stiles. I'm with the Orange Coast College Recycling Center. Many of you may have known Mike Carey, who was our sustainability coordinator at Orange Coast College. He just retired this last June after 35 years of service. So we totally thank him for everything he's done, both for the college, our recycling program, and for the community over those 35 years. But I'm here to talk about recycling, just to give kind of a semi-brief, semi-in-depth overview. At the Orange Coast College Recycling Center, recycling is our main thing. Just to give a little bit of a background overview about our program, it was established in 1970 as a result of the very first Earth Day. Our student leaders had a guest on campus, a couple of guests for that very first Earth Day, talking about the environment, talking about saving the planet, talking about these great big platitudes about what we need to do as a country and as a planet. And the students kind of were reflecting and listening, and one of them just kind of raised their hand really quick and said, "Hey, all that's great, but what can we do as students here in California? What can we do?" And he said, "Just start recycling." So our program started as just a really small fundraiser where the students went around, totally volunteer effort, to pick up newspapers in order to recycle as a fundraiser for the veterans coming back from Vietnam. Since then, it's definitely exploded. We've had a couple of different kind of small facilities, and a few years ago, we built a great brand new state-of-the-art facility that I'll get into in just a couple minutes. But we are an organization owned and operated by our associated students at Orange Coast College. So all the funds that we make at the end of the fiscal year go back to the students. They fund student services, student activities, things like the school newspaper and athletics, our tutoring center and children's center are all partly funded through the money we raise at the recycling center. In addition, we are a public drop-off and CRV buyback centers for all the bottles and cans. So if you ever look on your receipt after buying a single-use container at the store, you'll see that CRV is a deposit you pay on the bottle at the store that you get refunded when you bring to a center like ours. So this is our brand new recycling center. We're super excited to be sitting on about 5 acres after coming from a site that's about half an acre. So we've got a lot more real estate to be able to do everything that we need to do. We used to have about 8 parking places, which often led to a pileup in the center when we had rushes of customers that wanted to come in to recycle. Now we have 45 parking places, so we're super excited to be able to serve the needs of the entire community. Our facility has a lot of really cool kind of environmental designs incorporated into it. This right here is kind of our break room for our employees, all of our student assistants. Is decorated to give a little bit of privacy for them, but we have clear walls that we tossed in plastic bottles. Just a visual kind of reminder of what we do and decoration. A little bit more of our facilities, you'll see that we have a lot of natural light coming in. We had some certifications for our facility operating in the best environmental manner that we can. So the first is LEED. If you're unfamiliar, leadership in energy and environmental design has to do with the actual building, the materials used, the functionality, the different zones for HVAC, the lighting. We use a lot of natural lighting, skylighting, big windows. That's LEED. Sites is sustainable sites has to do with our landscaping. So we use only drought resistant California native landscaping around our facility in order to promote those values. True Zero Waste is the newest certification from the United States Green Business Council, Green Building Council, for operating in a zero waste manner. So our facility is the first in the entire world to be certified all 3 certifications. So we're super excited about having accomplished that. It was really huge and a lot of effort from a lot of people. We're super excited about that. We do have, I think that education is probably one of our main drivers for our recycling center. So we've got educational kind of placards around our sites just to give visual demonstrations about what we do, our part, our county's part, and kind of the whole process from when we collect materials to when they're shipped off and then back on shelves. I think that if I had it my way, we would educate ourselves out of business. The 3 R's that we, or now expanded to 5 or 7 or 9 R's that we have now, I think it's important to note the order that they operate in. Recycling is the last in our list of R's because it should be the last resort. We're very much into zero waste and refusing and reusing materials before we have to get to that last step of recycling. Like I said, if I had it my way, I would educate people in such a way where I don't have a job anymore. That's kind of the ideal world we're all kind of going for. Sustainability on our campus, we take as the ability to maintain at a certain level, or more pointedly, not deplete natural resources to maintain balance. So it's basically, it's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of the future. Recycling, on the other hand, tends to be a lot more kind of vague in how it can be applied. When I give presentations to younger kids, I like to just give them a super basic definition. Recycling is taking something old and turn it into something new. That's just a super, super basic definition. There's a lot of different types of materials. When we combine more than one material into a product, it makes it harder and harder to recycle because all of those materials have to then be separated in order to be recycled in their different ways. These right here are the types of materials that we collect at our recycling center, from newspaper, office mixed paper, and cardboard to our cans and bottles, aluminum, plastic, and glass. We do recycle some electronic waste, which is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. Every single day, we throw away 100,000 computers in our country. Every single year, we throw away 1 million cell phones. So there's a lot of really unscrupulous behaviors in that whole electronic waste recycling industry. We try and only work with vendors that are certified through e-stewards, through R2, to be able to handle this stuff in an environmentally safe manner. So we're not only looking at what we do at our site, but everything downstream from us is just as important to us and our impacts on the environment. We also do take used cooking oil, fluorescent light bulbs, and batteries. Our cooking oil is sent off to our vendors who filter it through and turn it into a biodiesel fuel for cars. And if anybody hasn't seen or kind of experienced one of those cars, anything that runs on a diesel engine can be converted to run on biodiesel or vegetable oil, essentially. And when you crank it over, the exhaust smells like French fries. So it's always super fun. Plastics are the bane of our existence, pretty much. 300 million tons of plastic are produced annually, as compared to 1.5 million tons in 1950. Plastic has become the way that a lot of our waste comes about. Plastic is designed for single use, for small product lifetimes, and then is just discarded, sometimes recycled. There are 7 different kinds of plastics, and on the bottom of anything plastic, you should be able to see this plastic resin code. What that means is basically just the type of plastic it is. Different plastics have different properties. So like a number 5 plastic, a polypropylene, will have better tolerance to extremes in temperature versus number 1 plastic. So if anybody's ever seen something hot, like coffee or something, poured into a number 1 just a regular water bottle, you'll notice that it starts to kind of bleed a little bit. It gets a little bit sticky. So that, yeah, different plastics have different uses depending on their properties. The tragedy, though, is there's really only recycling going on for number 1 and number 2 plastics. The numbers 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s is typically cheaper for companies to make new plastics to those types than it is for them to recycle or buy recycled material for their products. So there's basically no recycling going on for those. I think there are kind of pockets here and there where there are kind of a market for those materials, but in general, it's just an economic driven decision that it's really only the number 1s and number 2s that are ever recycled. The number 7s, in fact, are probably never going to be recycled because 7 is just other. It's just anything that's not a number 1 through 6. So because they don't know what type of plastic or plastics are in there, it's not going to get recycled. Plastics are one of the leading causes of ocean pollution. There's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We see periodically really kind of compelling images like this, or like the turtle with the straws that really kind of drove the ban on single-use plastic straws. These types of images aren't just images on the computer. These are real life. These are what people have to deal with all around the world because of our excessive wastes here in the developed world. One of the cool products that we've kind of come across, and this is actually where a lot of our number 1 plastic goes from the recycling center, is a company called the Bottle Box. And what they're one of the only FDA approved recyclers of plastic that use them in food and beverage containers, just because the content of that plastic is really highly regulated. So the Bottle Box takes on average 2 or 3.5 plastic bottles to turn into a to-go container for restaurants. I know they use them at like the Habit Burger for their salads, and Lucille's uses them as well. We use them in our student cafeteria on campus. So that's a really good example of a concept called closing the loop, where we are sending materials off to be recycled, but we're not just stopping there. We're continuing to close the loop by buying products that have recycled material. That helps to drive the markets of recycled goods so that they're able to economically be justified in being recycled. As far as waste generations go, the United States is the most wasteful country in the world at 4 pounds of trash per person per day. Now, California is the most wasteful state in the United States. Orange County, where I live and most of us probably live, is the most wasteful county in California at 11.9 pounds of trash per person per day. That's almost 3 times the national average. I like to ask people, why do you think this is? I get a lot of responses, people kind of guessing different things or just having no idea why. What it all comes down to is wealth. Because we're such a wealthy county, we can afford so much waste. And that kind of is what it comes down to. People in a lot more economically disadvantaged areas are forced to do the reusing. They're forced to hang on to something until it completely breaks and then try and use it in another way. They're forced to do that by their economic situations. So I think that there's a lot that we can learn as people living in an affluent area from the waste habits of people that can't afford anything else. Just to give a kind of a brief overview of a landfill, we've got material that's put into the landfill and covered every single day just to kind of keep the smells down and everything else. It's typically lined with some kind of plastic or clay, and below is where the water table is. So one of the biggest issues with landfills is those liners. They're not always perfect. In fact, they're not often perfect. There are things that can leach out. A lot of the decomposition in landfills is anaerobic and leads to leachate and some other like toxic things that kind of leach to the bottom of these landfills. And when those liners aren't perfect, that kind of stuff can leach into the groundwater and pollute our actual drinking water, which is one of the reasons why organics and composting has been such a big deal in the last 10 years or so, is because they're realizing all these different effects that organics in our landfills are having on the environment and on our drinking water. There are all kinds of disposable items out there. There's also a lot of great reusable options. Most of our cities in our county have separated recycling and trash, and that's perfect for recycling. The more that things can be separated, the more easily they are recycled as they get downstream. If we look at this picture, this is from a city that's got both trash and recycling together. We see food waste in there, wrappers, papers, bags. Not only do these things have to be separated out by hand, usually, but there's also contamination issues. What happens when someone throws away a bowl of chili into their trash that has newspapers? That chili gets all over the newspapers and makes them very difficult, if not impossible, to recycle. So contamination is one of the biggest issues with that single stream recycling. Wishful recycling is another way of expressing that kind of contamination too. So if everybody just kind of thinks, okay, I hope this can get recycled, so I'm gonna throw it in my recycle bin, and that actually causes a lot more work and a lot more costs downstream to be able to recycle these products in the separation areas. So it's really important to know what is and what is not recyclable before you're throwing it in the bin. As we bring the costs of recycling down is when we can bring the volumes of recycling up. And that's really kind of the main point about that wishful recycling, is just kind of knowing ahead of time, even before or as you're buying it, whether or not something can be recycled. Our typical school lunch that kids have, we have maybe a can of apple juice, got a yogurt container, tuna can. You see everything's kind of wrapped, everything's individually packaged. This is kind of what we mean by a wasteful lunch. Yeah, everything kind of just individually packaged and tossed in there. The better alternative is to have reusable everything. So we've got little trays that we can put our food in. We've got reusable silverware. We've got cloth napkins, reusable drink containers. This is what everybody is talking about when they're talking about eliminating waste, about reducing, reusing before recycling. Now, bottled water is probably one of the biggest scams out there. $10 billion in annual sales. For most bottled waters, in fact, are just extremely comparable to tap water. Not only is it a total scam to buy what you can fill up in your house for pennies for buying it for dollars and dollars, but significantly contributes to our waste habits here in this country. 60 million bottles are disposed of every day. That take 15 million barrels of oil to produce. refillable is our option. I've got my refillable water bottle at work, right on top of our little break room area, and it's just the easiest thing and saves so much money to be able to just refill that rather than buying water bottles every day. We just heard an awesome presentation about organics and compost, so I won't go into this too much. What I do want to mention is most composting, like traditional and vermiculture composting, is aerobic in nature. So it needs that kind of oxygen to be able to happen. Anaerobic, not technically composting, it's technically just digestion, is something that's coming up a little bit more and more. It doesn't use oxygen, so it doesn't have the same kind of effects for like a soil amendment as regular composting would, but what it does produce is methane. And gases like that. So I know that CR&R, who's one of the primary waste haulers for Orange County, has a brand new anaerobic digester that they put into use within the last few years. And I know that cities are hopping on board with collecting their residents' kitchen wastes, food waste and things like that for that anaerobic digester. So it's an in-vessel system. It's not kind of exposed to the outside, so there's not a whole lot of the same kind of risks of smells and rodents. And CR&R uses their anaerobic digesting system to be able to power their fleet of trucks. So that's a really great example. I know that Costa Mesa's hopped on board of that organics program. I know that cities kind of around the county are considering following suit. But that's another great example of being able to divert those organics from the landfill and use them to work for us. Greenwashing now is kind of the main thing the next thing I wanted to touch on. There's a lot of buzzwords out there. There's a lot of things that don't have any meaning beyond marketing. So I highly suggest that everyone take a look at the kinds of things they buy, look at the labels on them, and do a little bit of research to see if those labels actually mean anything, if they have any teeth to them, or if they're just buzzwords. Because when like our smokestacks here, if we're just painting the smokestacks green, they're still contributing all that pollution and waste. Just because something says certified with a green check mark, that doesn't tell us what it's certified for. It doesn't tell us how it's more beneficial than its counterpart right next to it on the shelf. Corporations have really been taking advantage of our desire to be more earth friendly by just kind of slapping these labels on them and not really meaning anything by them. Some of the important legislation that's come up and helped us at the Recycling Center and us as a state of California is first was AB 2020 in 1987. That was the bottle bill that put deposits on our single-use bottles and cans. AB 939 was kind of one of the first drivers of California reducing its waste. AB 341 is the kind of most recent iteration of that calls for 75% diversion by this year. I'm not sure how we're looking for that. I don't know, maybe somebody else has seen those numbers or projected numbers to see if we're being able to meet that. But our plastic bag ban and our most recent plastic straw ban, both significant legislations here in the state of California for waste diversion. One of the biggest topics of the last 5 years or 10 years or so in recycling has been China. Now, traditionally, a really big majority of recycling from the United States and the Western world in general has gone over to China for recycling. They're a manufacturing-based economy that's been on the rise for decades. So they've been needing more and more materials to complete all of their manufacturing they're doing. Well, lately, China has seen its own problems. They've seen all the contamination in the waste that we're sending over and the materials that we're sending over. They're seeing their own kind of rising middle class, their own consumption increase. So what they did was they said, no, we're not going to accept any waste from other countries. We're gonna just deal with our own waste and turn that into our own raw materials. So what that's done to recycling worldwide, it's driven, because of the drop in demand, it's driven all the markets completely downward. There are some efforts to create different markets for recycling in other countries around Southeast Asia, but I think that just kind of kicks the can down the road in regards to the problem. What we really need to be doing is addressing our wastes where they come from. Extended producer responsibility is a great concept where we look at companies that are producing toxic things, wasteful things, and telling them, hey, be better, figure something out where what we can do with these materials, these products when they're done being used. Extended producer responsibility is going to be a pretty significant concept, I think, in the next decade, as we look to hold these companies accountable for the things that they're producing. So yeah, addressing this waste where it happens is so much easier, so much more efficient, so much better of a concept than addressing where it goes when we send it out. There are a lot of companies that are jumping onto the zero waste bandwagon. So for one reason or another, whether it's for marketing purposes or whether it's for actual environmental purposes, the results are the same, where they're working on their processes to eliminate waste. Sierra Nevada Brewing, Toyota, Ryco Electronics, like these companies have made that commitment to just kind of internalize and look at themselves and their own waste products and see what they can do better to eliminate those. Zero waste, kind of as alluded to in speakers previous, isn't as much about the number zero as it is about the attitude, about the lifestyle. It means that you're thinking and considering about the things that you use and what happens to them after they're used. It all kind of comes down to choices. Do we continue on the path we're on, or do we try and do things better? It's great to be able to recycle. It's even better to not have to recycle because things are being used over and over and over. Cool. That's all I got, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Leo. Okay, we do have some questions for you that popped up in the Q&A chat that I want to announce out loud and see if maybe you can answer some of these for us.
Sure.
Jamie asked, in terms of recycling, does your center send numbers 3 through 7 to the landfill?
Those things do end up getting landfilled, yeah. If we could find a market for those, if we could find someone who could even take them off our hands without us having to pay for it, we would totally do that. But unfortunately, they are landfilled. I've heard some kind of rumblings that like a number 5 plastic is starting to gain a little bit of value, especially with all the single-use things that are being used during COVID. So number 5s we're definitely going to have to take a look at, but pretty much the 3 through 7s are all landfilled, unfortunately.
Okay, and would you say that's pretty common for most recycling areas?
Yeah.
Okay.
The places with the best recycling rates, so like the Bay Area is great at recycling. One of the reasons for that is because it costs them so much to landfill things. Their tipping fees for people and companies bringing things things to the landfill are really expensive, whereas ours are dirt cheap comparatively. So there are areas like the Bay Area that do better with recycling, but yeah, we're just not there yet in Southern California.
Thank you. Annette asked, I used to get grief at work for bugging people to rinse out their jars, etc. before recycling. Is that super important to do? I hear you, Annette.
I know, right? First, it does kind of depend on how contaminated things are, but it all comes down to contamination. The more contamination that's in a stream of recyclables, the less recyclable the entire stream is going to be. So any effort that you can make to remove contaminations, washing out things, yeah, that's definitely helpful for the recycling process.
Okay. Adila asks, are there any plans to add a compost bin to our waste management, trash, recycle, green bins, etc.? I heard counties in the Bay Area have these.
You would have to check with your city. Each city has different contracts with their waste hauler. Like I said, I know that Costa Mesa is jumping on board of that organics train. Beyond just the yard waste that we're all really familiar with. So that's definitely something to check out at the city level. Go bug your city councilman that you want you want organics recycling or organics bins. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And Hind asks, do we have factories in the US that uses the recycled material? What happens now that countries that have major factories for recycled material are refusing to take our recycled waste? I think you kind of covered that with China, but
yeah, there are some factories here domestically that use recycled material. The Bottle Box was one of them. It's kind of one of the reasons that I like to highlight them is because they're right up here in Fontana, which is, Lake Paris. So that's from us at OCC, about a 90-minute trip or so. I like to kind of contrast, hey, this plastic bottle's making a 90-minute trip rather than a several thousand-mile trip over the ocean. I think that there are definitely difficulties in the bureaucracy getting businesses going, getting factories and manufacturing going in general. Adding recycled materials on top of that definitely puts another layer of difficulty. So I'm not sure how widespread the use of recycled materials are in domestic manufacturing, but it's definitely easier to do so if they're not making food products that or products that contain food or drink that are really highly regulated. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, guys.
Right. We're going to have our last panelist on, and then stick around for the end because I will talk a little bit about our Trash Talk Challenge that we're going to be launching today for the next week. But without further ado, I want to introduce Christina Robinson. She's with OC Coastkeeper.
Thank you, Carissa. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'll share my screen. All right. Okay, so my name is Christina. I'm the education coordinator at Orange County Coastkeeper, and I'm also a tide pool educator with Laguna Ocean Foundation. So since about 1950, when we really started to capitalize plastic, we've produced about 8.3 billion tons of plastic worldwide, with only about 9% of that being recycled. I have a little picture of the Eiffel Tower there because it's kind of hard to visualize 8.3 billion tons of plastic, but essentially that would be close to 1 million Eiffel Towers in weight. So a lot of plastic. As Leo kind of covered, our global plastic consumption per capita has really increased over the years. And if we continue increasing at this rate of consuming, we're looking at 12 billion metric tons of plastics in landfills by 2050. We know that we're producing about 300 million tons of plastic annually, with half of that being for single-use plastic. So again, those Lots of food packaging or plastic utensils, straws, most of which aren't recyclable, as we just learned. Things like plastic water bottles too. I was happy Leo touched on that. I have a lot of feelings about that as well. You know, besides that pollution adding to our environment and our wildlife, issues with recycling, it's also taking a lot of resources and energy. It can take up to 6 times the amount of water that's in that one plastic bottle to just make the plastic surrounding it. So they're just using a lot as well. We're seeing that like 8 million tons of plastic are being dumped into our oceans every year, as well as 1 in 3 of marine mammals being entangled in things in the ocean. A lot of that's coming from like ghost fishing gear. So any fishing nets that aren't being responsibly looked after, if those aren't taken back in, they're drifting out there. And so a lot of different animals can get caught in that. And then over 90% of seabirds are also being found with plastic pieces in their stomach. So if you guys go to the beaches nearby here, you know, think about all of our gulls, our pelicans, our different plovers and different shorebirds that are just foraging along that shoreline. We know now that 90% of the floating trash on the ocean is plastic, and plastic is not biodegradable. So when we think of that word degrade, I always think of, you know, a leaf out in the forest that's naturally decomposing and going to return to that soil and be helpful. And our plastic can't do that. When we look at the word bio of biodegradable, that's going to be utilizing those tiny microbes that kind of help that process, but different types of plastics, depending on what chemicals they're composed of, you know, it can be taking hundreds to thousands of years for them to break down into tinier plastic pieces. We're seeing that fish in the North Pacific are ingesting up to 24,000 tons of plastic each year, and that now our Great Pacific Garbage Patch is actually outnumbering our marine life, 6 pieces of trash for every 1 living organism. So here in this picture on the right, this is from one of our whales field trips when we're typically able to take our students out on field trips. You can see that yellow barrier there is called a trash boom. This is for the Wintersburg Channel. So this serves the cities of Fountain Valley, Westminster, and Garden Grove. And so it helps to protect that trash from floating over into the Bolsa Chica wetlands, which would then go into Huntington Harbor and then straight into the ocean. Unfortunately, it's just a surface barrier. So any of the plastics that can sink are going to make its way past that. And again, depending on what the plastic is made of, some of those float, some of those sink, and some can do both. You can also see that piece of that plastic bag on the other side of that. So, you know, it's preventing a lot, but it definitely has room for improvement. And we've been here also after rain events, and there's just trash everywhere. So we have lots of room for improvement. Here we can see some of the different plastic materials and where they'll fall in the ocean, depending on if they're floating or sinking, and then some timelines of how long it takes them to break down as well. And so I see a lot of trash at my jobs. This is again at the Bolsa Chica wetlands, even though it's an ecological reserve, also in neighborhoods. Walking my dog, and then anytime I'm surfing, I make all my friends pick up 5 pieces of trash, and now they feel so inclined even if I'm not with them. So. And then also tide pool trash. This trash kind of makes me extra sad because a lot of those organisms are living there. They're not going to be moving in or out of those tide pools, so they're having to actually live in that trash, especially things like cigarette butts. I'll see those in the tide pools too, and those are just leaching those chemicals. So we definitely don't need to litter. We can prevent all of that. So we know that trash is getting there from watersheds. Carissa explained all of that earlier. And so we're seeing that 80% of the trash on our beaches is actually making its way via that storm drain system. And that 73% of the beach litter worldwide is actually made of plastic. And that 90% of that plastic in our oceans is coming from 10 rivers off 2 continents. So it kind of just reiterates that we're all a part of a watershed and we're all connected. And so just kind of to reiterate that visually, anytime there's trash or litter on our streets, anytime it rains, it's windy, people are overwatering, we have that urban runoff, water's really heavy, so it's carrying all that trash to our ocean. This is something that when I was younger, I always read those signs that say, don't dump, leads to ocean, all drains lead to ocean. And I would see trash, but still think, oh, well, somebody has to be picking that up. That can't just be going to the ocean. But unfortunately, it does. And some of the beaches in Laguna Beach do a really good job of highlighting where those storm drains end outside of the cliff, so you can actually see that connection too. When it comes to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, it's actually two distinct patches brought together by the North Pacific subtropical gyres. We see that 54% of that trash is actually coming from land-based activities from North America and Asia versus 20% of the trash in the patch coming from actual water-based activities. And we're seeing that 70% of the marine debris we're finding is sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And so we like to tell our students too, when it comes to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, it's not like a trash island that you're walking on, it's more of like a plastic soup. And so again, just to reiterate, oh, sorry, here we go. So here you can kind of see those two distinct patches and then how they're bound together. Unfortunately, this isn't our only garbage patch. All of our oceans have their own garbage patch. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is just the largest, so it's the most well-known. And then here again, we can kind of see by types of plastic if they will float or sink, depending on those chemicals and what they're composed of. So some of you guys maybe have heard of microplastics. Our microplastics are defined as being less than 5 millimeters long. We also have smaller microplastics referred to as nanoplastics. And unfortunately, a lot of our microplastic pollution is coming from microfibers from our synthetic clothing material. So a picture on the right kind of shows the comparison of our organic clothing material versus the microfiber, how much smaller that diameter is. And so with all of our sewer water, all the water we use indoors, you know, laundry included, that goes to a wastewater treatment facility. And unfortunately right now, most of those facilities are unable to filter out or screen out those microfibers. The picture on the left is from when I used to work at an environmental consulting company where they would take ocean benthic sediment samples. And so just kind of looking at the bottom, and we would be pulling for tiny organisms, but I kept seeing all of this tiny plastic and trash under the microscope. So I just started to save it because this was really my first experience with microplastics. So this picture here is from Charles Moore of Algalita. This is, you can kind of see like that filamentous background and then that blue microfiber in between, as well as a little black microfiber off to the right. So where are microplastics being found? It is not just the ocean from our wastewater facilities with our microfibers. They're all over. It's in our freshwater systems. It's all through the water column, as well as deep as 36,000 feet. They're finding microplastics in ice samples from the Arctic and Antarctica, as well as, you know, in beer, in plastic packaged tea, table salt, tap water, and bottled water. A good mitigation for tea is if you drink loose leaf tea, then you don't have to worry about it. And there are a few companies that are legitimately only using organic cotton or paper, and there's no plastic lining. But we're also finding microplastics even in air pollution. I just listened to a podcast talk about microplastic rain being the new acid rain. So it'll be interesting to see what future research tells us about this. The picture on the right is an example of what our nurdles look like. So nurdles is how plastic is shipped around the country to be melted down and then produced into whatever plastic item it is. Unfortunately, if there's like a spill at a factory or in one of these trucks shipping this somewhere, you know, that those are going to go straight into our waterways and end up in our natural environments. And a lot of those look like little eggs. They look like a lot of food that our wildlife would be naturally foraging for. So I also just want to highlight that, you know, studies are also finding more microplastics in plastic bottled water compared to our tap water, and that these plastic water bottle companies, they have varying concentrations of microplastic particles, but 325 was the average number found. And again, these companies aren't making water, they're just producing the plastic. They have their own little recipe of minerals, and that's where you get that distinct flavor. We have very safe, clean water here in Orange County, especially in northern and central Orange County, because of our sanitation district and how they partner with our Orange County Water District. So we actually don't have to worry about microplastics here, and we're okay. But maybe you don't like the flavor of tap water, and if that's the case, you can get any type of a charcoal filter. And so some more sources of those microplastics are going to be micro beads. So just really tiny plastic beads that have been used in exfoliants for personal care products. There's some examples on the left side of that picture with some better alternatives on the right. I used different scrubs from like Lush, and they're also utilizing coffee grounds for the exfoliant. But the Obama administration back around in 2015 actually passed legislation, so companies shouldn't be doing this anymore, but it's always something that we want to just check and read our ingredients when we're buying things. Again, our microfibers from any type of synthetic textiles are going to be a primary source, those nurdles, and then other things like tire dust and marine coating, as well as different types of city dust and road markings. And our secondary sources of microplastics are going to unfortunately be all of our other plastic items that we have, depending on their composition. Some of those are going to break down into tinier and tinier pieces via photodegradation. So just that UV light from the sun mixed with oxygen, and they're just going to turn into those tiny microplastic pieces. So we know that our wildlife is being impacted by plastic. Any animals that are eating it, it's causing, it can cause mechanical blockages, as well as if they're eating a lot of plastic, they're feeling full, but they're not able to get any nutrients out of this. So they're actually being malnourished, and then that leads to starvation. There's been studies where fish have been fed microplastics, and it's actually changed their foraging behavior, as well as the chemical consequences of these plastics and the different chemicals that they've had when they were being produced. We know that some of those are BPA and phthalates, as well as when those plastics break down, they can also absorb other things in the environment like PCBs and pesticides. We know that more than 220 species have been impacted by microplastics alone, and then 700 marine species have been impacted by plastic pollution in general. So that's anything from our tiny little zooplankton and larvae all the way to our larger megafauna like whale, sharks, and dolphins. We had a study last year from the UK that looked at 50 stranded marine mammals, all of which had microplastics. Most of that was microfibers. Most of that was nylon, so probably from like fishing nets and different ghost fishing materials, but they also had broken down plastic food packaging as well. The microplastic pollution was not confirmed to be the cause of death for any of these animals, but they did all have high levels of those plastic-associated toxins. We also had 2 sperm whales in the news last year that had been stranded off of the Philippines and off of Italy with like 50 and 80 pounds of plastic in their stomach, which was also kind of surprising too, because sperm whales are really deep diving animals. They're foraging where it's really deep and dark. They're using their echolocation to find squid. So they're, in really deep waters, but they're still also finding that plastic. So this kind of begs the question if we are being impacted by plastic and microplastics. We know that half of these species that are found with microplastics, people are consuming. There's been at least one laboratory mice study done with toxicology where they're feeding them microplastics, and they found that those accumulated in the kidney, in the liver and intestines. They also had some molecules in the brain that could be toxic. And we also know again that those plastics contain a lot of those phthalates and or BPA replacements. So I've been seeing a lot of plastic, maybe plastic water bottles, like reusable plastic water bottles or Tupperware that, say BPA free. But all that means is that instead of BPA, they have replaced that with BPS or BPF. So unfortunately, it functions exactly the same. So I try to avoid that, especially when it comes to like food packaging and things where we're using that stuff to like hold what we're eating or drinking, because we know that those, they can lead to childhood obesity, cardiovascular disease, and also are known endocrine disruptors. So that has to do with our hormone system, and our hormone system is super important for our whole life for a bunch of different body functions. We also know again that when these plastics are photodegrading, you know, they're again absorbing bacteria, viruses, PCBs, and pesticides. And a lot of these are known carcinogens that can cause adverse health effects. And then these microplastics are being passed up the food web. A study came out last year also saying that people are, you know, eating about a credit card size worth in weight of microplastics every week. And this is a lady that I follow on social media who just kind of highlights the different objects that we have that are kind of geared towards younger kids and toddlers, things that they're putting in their mouth, and all of the different risks affiliated with that. So really, to answer that question, we need more research. We need more research to see how being exposed to tiny amounts of plastic over a long time are going to impact our health. But more reason to try to reduce our plastic, because I don't necessarily want to wait for the research to come out. We also need a standardized method for collecting and comparing microplastic research so scientists can kind of share their studies and their data together. But we do have some really cool human innovation that's come across over the years. So 4Ocean is a company where for every bracelet purchase, they will remove 1 pound of trash. And they also have added these like arms that go to the front bow of their boat. So they're able to kind of collect a lot of surface trash that way. We have the Ocean Cleanup Project by Boyan Slat, who was 16 years old when he thought of this idea of utilizing the ocean surface currents to kind of bring in the plastic trash. And his first success was his first attempt was unsuccessful, but then they came back to the drawing boards, and last fall in 2019, they had their first success of bringing back all of this plastic and trash. And he's partnering with different businesses where they're actually going to be able to like upcycle that ocean claim plastic into different types of long-lasting items that people can use and wear. So things like sunglasses and shoes, things that aren't getting washed and aren't going to be thrown away quickly. We also have the Seabirds project that was created by 2 Australian surfers. So this is them utilizing like a 10-gallon drum that sits in a harbor and just floats with the water, and then trash can come in. And then we have Sandra Ortiz, who's a researcher from Mexico, where she's actually created a type of plastic utilizing these cactus leaves pictured up at the top right. So she's only using the leaves so that way the plant stays alive, so it's super sustainable. She's juicing these leaves and then adding non-toxic chemicals, and is actually able to create a brittle plastic and then one that's more flexible and flimsy in only about 9 days. And both of her types of plastic are actually degrade and break down within a month. So I really hope that, you know, our food industries could utilize her flimsy, flexible plastic as a type of food packaging or something in the future. On the left, we have some baby legs. So these are actually a type of microplastic trawl that you can make at home. We had some high school students last year actually use these. It took them less than 2 hours to make 2 sets and less than $10 at Target. And they were actually researching up in the upper Newport Bay. So they had one site off of the fresh water off of one of the storm drains, and then they also had a site off of the dock to compare to a marine environment. So they would just flip the tights around, use forceps, try to pull up any type of organic matter that was still there. And then these are pictures of some of the microfibers that they were able to see last year. We also have Fionn, who won the Google Science Scholar Award last year. So he was actually able to utilize a type of oil and magnetite powder to create this type of ferrofluid that actually acted as a magnet and was successful in taking up like 87% of the microplastics in the water. There's a nice video of this on YouTube, but I took that out just to save some time, but you guys can look that up later. But it's really amazing. It's just like this magnetic rod, and then he swifts it around and all the little particles attached to that. So hopefully our wastewater facility systems will be able to upscale this to industry, and we'll have some solutions for that microfiber pollution. If you're wondering on what you can do at home, avoiding fast fashion, like a lot of those cheap materials, is a great way. However, things like leggings, I'm going to have my leggings. So we do have some options I'll talk about in a second about how to wash those. But a great way to also mitigate that is buying secondhand, going to a thrift store, having a clothes swap with your friends. I've done some of those. And then also when you can, utilizing buying organic materials like jeans, cotton, and or hemp clothing too. Washing your clothes in cool water and at a reduced spin cycle can also help reduce like how fast and how much that those synthetic materials break apart. And then we also want to just make sure that we're not washing our clothes with any type of hard objects like shoes or maybe like a backpack or anything. Wash that separately because that'll also help prevent that abrasion process. And then again, just always do your research when you're looking at your personal care cosmetic products, just to make sure they don't have those little micro beads. And then avoiding our larger plastic items that are single use will also help prevent those from breaking down and turning into microplastics. So here we have some cool items. The Coral Ball is a portable option for your washer machine. It is trying to mimic how our corals filter feed. We also have the Guppy Friend, which is a bag that you would put your clothes in and then put that into the washing machine. And then the Lover Filter is a permanent option and also the most effective at trying to prevent those microfibers from being released. And again, here we have really great tap water, but if you're in an area that doesn't have the best tap water or you're concerned about the microplastics, Clearly Filtered and Tap Water are two great companies that have different options of how to filter out. So similar to like a Brita filter or something that connects straight to the sink or even your refrigerator line. If you're wondering what else you can do, we've heard about, the 7 R's now that we have. So always, trying to refuse. It's always practice makes perfect. So sometimes, like my boyfriend might forget and then he brings home a straw and then I get mad, but it's all practice makes perfect. So what I've also found myself is that I used to say, please, no straw or no utensils. And then I found that I would still receive that a lot. I think probably the please cued the worker like, oh, don't forget, like they want this. So I found it more successful when I say no thank you or no straw thanks, like just saying no first in front of whatever the item is. And we know that we can always be creative and repurpose items before we are throwing them away as well. And also my personal mitigation that I've been trying to do when it comes to having to buy plastic items is looking at those plastic numbers that Leo brought up, and I'll try to just buy the lower number comparatively to, if there's like the same plastic option, but it's a higher number. The lower the number, the more likely it is to get recycled. So I try to tell that to everybody as well. And, or if like for drinks and things like that, if the option exists that it's in, a can or glass, then I'll buy that option over the plastic option as well. So Leo got into greenwashing, so I won't cover that again, but just to mention to look for those awesome certification codes. So TUV from Austria, they're really great because they'll also say if it's at home compostable. And then now finally we have the Biodegradable Products Institute in America that just started. So hopefully we'll start to see that on more products since we don't have that federal regulation on labeling just yet. If you eat seafood, to help reduce all of the ghost fishing gear, it's really important to know where your seafood is coming from. So you can look for that little blue sticker at the top that's certified sustainable seafood, or the Monterey Bay Aquarium has the Seafood Watch app online and mobile. It's free. It's great. Say there's an item you want, but it's actually not a super sustainable fishery. They'll provide you a alternative to that too. So something that will taste similar and have a similar texture. And then NOAA also has the Fish Watch program on their website as well. So here's some helpful websites with resources. I created Plastic Me Not, another website just to kind of have all of this stuff together as well last year. and then just all the different ways that Orange County Coastkeeper, helps keep our water clean in this region. And then since it is the last Saturday of September, we've been doing virtual trash scavenger hunt. So today is the last day. So if you guys are doing a neighborhood cleanup, our challenge today is just to fill your bag or bucket of trash. And you can check out our website and see details on how to participate and enter to win some fun prizes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. All right, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk to you a little bit about our Trash Talk Challenge, which goes along with the same idea here, being able to collect from our own neighborhoods. Let me see if I can get some of the stuff moved over to the side. All right. All right. Can everybody see that? It's looking good. Okay, so let's talk trash. We've been talking all day about all the different ways that we can reduce our waste. I'm definitely feeling inspired, and I'm going to make some changes in my own personal life. But considering it is Coastal Cleanup Day, and we need to get out there and do a little bit of waste mitigation, get some of that trash off of the ground, so before it gets out to the ocean, and then we can stop the flow of the trash by reducing and changing some of our habits. So what do? We already kind of talked a little bit about watersheds, where they come from, but this is just a map of our watershed for Upper Newport Bay, some of the cities that are incorporated within our watershed. So if you live in any of these cities, then you know that you're definitely within our watershed. But like I said before, and like Christina said, everybody is part of a watershed. So even if you live outside of these areas, even if you're in the middle of Kansas, you're still part of a watershed somewhere. The total estimated population within our watershed of Upper Newport Bay is 640,000. That probably explains a lot, going to Leo's statistics as to why we have so much waste and why we are one of the largest producers of waste, because we have a ton of people living in our area. So, and we definitely see the result of that. Okay, so what do we do about this? We challenge you to get out there today for the next week, so starting today through next Saturday, the 3rd, to get out there and do as much as you can. Clean up in your neighborhoods, parks, beaches, public places. You can go to Upper Newport Bay and clean along the trails if you'd like to. However, we ask please stay on trail in public areas. You can go down Back Bay Drive or any of the public hiking trails to clean, but you are not allowed to be out in the wetlands. So please stay out of that area. However, the trails in that area are pretty well managed, and the OC Parks crew goes out there and regularly and routinely cleans on the Muth Center side of the bay. So I would recommend probably hitting Back Bay Drive or going along those areas more. But pretty much anywhere that's public, feel free to go and do some cleaning. As an additional aspect to this challenge, we're asking that if you can ask your family, friends, neighbors, places of business, whatever, to help pledge $1 for every gallon of trash that you can collect in the next week. You can use that as a donation for the Newport Bay Conservancy. We are a nonprofit organization, as you know, and COVID has definitely taken us for a spin this year. So if we can take some of this trash, talk to our friends and our family about our waste, and be able to use that as a donation tool to be able to launch some of our education programs and restoration programs for this next year, it'll definitely help. So, and it's basically like a walk-a-thon, except you're collecting trash instead of walking or running, laps around a school or something like that. So $1 for every gallon from your family, friends, and businesses. And who can participate? Anybody. It's any ages. I trust that you know your children and you can make the decision of whether or not you want them to participate in this. We usually recommend ages 8 and up just for safety and because they may be touching things that are sharp or dirty or what have you, but you can make that call on your own. You can work alone, you can work as a family, you can work in small groups of co-quarantine family, friends, what have you. However, keep in mind that we are still in COVID and you want to make sure that you're being safe. So follow all the normal public health restrictions and what have you. Okay, let's see if I can move this down just a little. There we go. Okay, for this modified event, we're asking to measure your trash by the gallon instead of by weight, which normally for Coastal Cleanup Day, we would measure by pound. But most people don't have a scale to measure that with in their own house. So some tips of standard gallon size containers that you might be able to use. If you have a close to empty milk jug, before throwing that milk jug out, you can cut the top off. That's a gallon. So you can use that to collect and know how many gallons that you go based off of how many times you fill that milk jug up. Paint cans also work. I don't have any paint cans laying around, but maybe somebody does in their garage. You might be able to use that. You could also use your grocery bags. If you've had to get grocery bags, plastic grocery bags, those are roughly about 3 to 4 gallons. So you can use those and reuse those items and be able to get those out. 5 gallon is like your standard hardware store plastic bucket, like the Lowe's or Home Depot buckets are usually a 5 gallon bucket. I highly recommend this option considering that it's low waste. You just put everything in that bucket and then dump the bucket into the trash can. Make sure you clean it out with soap and water and everything afterwards. But that's probably one of your best ways to collect. And then you could also just measure it based off of the total amount that you collect at the end of the day. If you know that you filled so many trash bags and those trash bags were 25 gallon bags or what have you, roughly where you're at in your totals. All right, let's see. Make sure, as we're asking you to go out there and challenging you to clean up trash, this is on your own, but make sure that you stay safe and have a good time while you're doing it. Just some tips, make sure that you're following all traffic laws and being a good pedestrian and, not running out into traffic to get a plastic bottle or something like that. Just be safe. Wear colors, I totally spelled wear wrong. I did this at like 10:30 last night. Wear colors that can be easily seen by cars and things like that. Don't trespass. If you are working alone, know your surroundings, be aware of where you're at, let someone know where you're going and when you want to return. If you plan on going, out into the wilderness to go find trash. If you're avoid cleaning at dusk or dawn, stay in well-lit areas, stay on trails, and then just make sure that you wear your gloves and reusable if possible. Use a separate container for sharp objects. I like to use a water bottle or something that I find out while I'm cleaning up and then throw anything sharp into that. All right, some specific standards for public safety. Teams should be with those that you've practiced social distancing with or quarantined with. Respect any current public health guidelines. Wear a facial covering if you are going to be within 6 feet of others. Keep your distance from others that you don't live with. Use hand sanitizer and wash when you can. All the same stuff that we're all used to at this point. And then I make sure that once you are done collecting all your trash that you dispose of it outside. Don't bring it inside to your home because you don't know what kind of contamination those things might have. All right, last step is recording your data. For this purpose, for the challenge, we're asking that you can fill out our Trash Talk data form after you're done collecting. All of this information is on our flyer. We'll send that information out to you after the webinar. You can also email me to be able to get some of this information. So you'll fill out the information in the Google form, and then you can upload your pledge sheet also if you choose to do that. pledge donations after you're done collecting from your family and friends and what have you, you can send it electronically through our PayPal link on our website, or you can write us a check and mail it. Just make sure that you mail it to our PO box. That information is also on the pledge sheet instead of our office, considering that we're only in the office every so often nowadays. Oops, wrong direction. If you do choose to take on the challenge and collect pledges, we'd like to thank you for that and reward you. So as a thank you for participating in the challenge, those that upload or email a pledge sheet and fill out the data form by October 7th, so we give you a little extra time to collect everything, will be entered into a drawing to win a private kayak tour for up to 10 people. So each pledge that you collect equals a ticket into the drawing. So the more pledges, the more chances to win. You don't have to collect pledges to participate in the cleanup, of course. You can go out there and just collect on your own. However, this is just a little extra benefit, extra added bonus to help out our nonprofit. All right, everybody, so thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your participation and helping to protect our bay. I hope that you have great success getting out there today to collect trash and making some great changes in your lives to reduce waste. Tell your family, tell your friends, spread it on social media, get the information out there. And the more that participate, the better. But you know what, it's Coastal Cleanup Day. We're kind of doing Coastal Cleanup Month. There's all kinds of resources. Also, if you go to coastal.ca.gov is the Coastal Commission website. They have information about how you can also record your data with the Swell app, I think it's called. You can kind of record exactly what kinds of trash you're finding, and that kind of gives them more statistics and information about what we're finding. But go out there and do some good, and every day, like Earth Day is every day is Coastal Cleanup Day too. So we'll all do what we can. Thank you to all of our panelists today for talking and providing such great information. If you have any other questions, let me know. We'll go ahead and stay on just for a minute or two for any questions, but otherwise, I hope you all enjoy your Saturday and have a great day. If you want to go ahead and leave now, you are welcome to. And thanks for coming, everyone.